Hey, what's up, guys? Chris Fluck here. Chris Fluck Podcast, episode 10. I'm kind of pumped about this one because I set a goal at the beginning of the year. I wanted to put out 52 podcasts in this year. On average, that's one a week, all right? Had some weeks where I was having some issues with scheduling when I could get the production man, Chris Fiegel, when he could come in, coordinating his schedule with my schedule, with the guest schedule, and on top of that, coordinating when is the gym available that we could actually record in it. So I decided I needed to do something about it. Took this in my own hands. Right now it's me, it's the gym, it's my iPhone recording, and it's this awesome Canon camera that I have right now. It's a one-man show today. I hope this thing comes out well. Now, yesterday was a rough day. Our daughter has nothing serious going on, but we did have to go see a specialist for a certain procedure here, and it just so happens that we went to the building we had to go to was right next to the Children's Cancer Center, and just kind of being over there and seeing, just being around some kids that, might have some sort of terminal illness was like super eye-opening and super scary, and it kind of like puts life and puts things into perspective sometimes. So just having that experience kind of shook me up a little bit yesterday. Our daughter is okay, but we were just in the general facility of this, and whatever we had to go see for our daughter, it just kind of makes you realize, like, all right, we don't have it that bad. Our daughter doesn't have it that bad. Everything's going to be okay. And, just kind of cherish all the moments you have because, let's just say something happens one day and it's like, what did you do that moment before you've got like this earth-shattering news? Like, how did you handle that moment? Did you handle that moment on your cell phone? Did you handle that moment taking a nap on the couch? Did you handle that moment, ignoring somebody? Or, were you totally present in that moment and gave that person your attention, or you gave them all the love that they deserve? Things like that. So these are all these crazy thoughts that went through my mind. And then 3:30 rolls around and our baby wakes up and she doesn't want to go to bed or go back to bed. So I'm holding her, walking her around. Some of these nights in the past, I'd be totally frustrated about it, like, just go to bed, please. But last night I was just like, I just kind of appreciated it a little bit. And if she needed me, to hold her and walk her for 5 or 10 minutes, I set her down. 20 minutes later, she woke up again and had to do the same thing over again. So she was a little bit restless for a period of time. But anyway, just our experience that we had yesterday in the daytime made me kind of appreciate all these moments that we do have with our children, and to just kind of cherish them and enjoy them. So that's my opening monologue. Now, like I said, it's just me here in the camera. I feel like a real-world confessional. I'm just staring at this camera right now, and we're about to dive into some stuff here. So it's been spoken about. I've coached some sports in the past. About 10 years of my life, almost a third of my life, I spent coaching. So I came across this book. Actually, when I was done coaching, it was Brett Bartholomew's Conscious Coaching. Brett Bartholomew, his personal story is an interesting one, and it's a rare story in the sense that, when you hear about eating disorders and stuff like that, it's usually not often associated with males. And this was an individual who had a terrible eating disorder in high school, and he had to be hospitalized for it. So he's coming at you with a different kind of perspective and different kind of life experiences that I've ever had or ever experienced, or know anybody that has ever gone through this, at least openly. A lot of this stuff is hush-hush. So this man's approach in this book is a lot of the stuff that he said was just kind of the way that my brain operated when I was first coaching, and now I'm working with people in kind of a private sector. A lot of this stuff kind of resonated with me, and I totally agreed with it, and I don't want to make it seem like this is some sort of, I use his book as confirmation bias, but I'm like, man, if I would have read some of this stuff when I first got into coaching, I may have been able to develop my coaching methodology a little sooner, just because I knew that it was okay to think the way that I did, and I didn't have to be like all the other people that I've coached with, and to just kind of be comfortable with what you do, and to kind of do your own thing and what you felt was right, and be authentic in what you're doing. So, like I said, I've coached for about 10 years. After high school, I played 3 sports, decided in college, for some reason, I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm done with athletics. I'm not going to do anything anymore. I'm a short 5'8" guy. Played high school quarterback. There wasn't a lot of colleges looking at me for that position. Had some coaches come in and talk, some Division II, Division III coaches, just to come in and talk to you a little bit. Probably going to end up playing defense. Thought I would pass. Wrestling, I was above average. Kind of found my way a little bit later in high school. where there was maybe some potential for some upside if I would have tried to maybe pursue that in college and really been dedicated to the sport, because I wasn't dedicated to it, say, in the first couple years of high school. Who knows? Maybe I could have wrestled track and field. Probably not fast enough and wasn't throwing the javelin far enough to compete at the next level. So I decided, hey, maybe it'll be a good idea to just do nothing. So I lost the structure when I was in college. So athletics provided some great structure for me growing up. It was school, it was practice, it was come home and it was eat, maybe do some schoolwork, go to bed, repeat, all throughout the whole year. Summertime, it was work, practice, that's it. So I go to school, lost that structure, ended up just really struggling with school. Grades would be good, grades would be bad. Good, bad, decided to leave. I was going to Bloomsburg at the time. I just left, dropped out. I was a college dropout for a year. Thought about going in the postal service. I wanted a job maybe where I could just be by myself, go walk around all day. I was like, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll do that. Drove to the post office center, and literally turned around and went home that day and just decided I'm just going to go back to school, change majors, get into sport management. I started at a local community college for a year, then transferred to a state school here in Pennsylvania. So now I'm back in school. I get into coaching. My brother, who I spoke about in another podcast, he was coaching wrestling at the time. So I'm taking classes. I'm working as a personal trainer. I decided to start coaching wrestling with my brother and a couple other guys that I grew up with. I did that for 2 years. The team was very successful, and the team is still very successful. The high school coach is getting it done in the sense that he's super structured, super organized, and he knows what it takes. So we put a big emphasis. I'm at a small school here, and we had 20-plus kids every year, and we would wrestle teams that have 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids. So the head coach for varsity, he just realized it was super important to get kids out. So we had to create a good environment where not only did we get kids out, we kept them out. And because of that, we were successful because we had a full lineup. We were able to beat these teams that didn't have a lot of kids. That was the first couple of years. Eventually, then our kids got more, with more kids in the room, more competition. More competition led to, people started to separate themselves from the pack. So the guys that put in a lot of time and work hard, they would become the better wrestlers. Some of the guys that weren't doing that saw that and were like, hey, I got to step my game up a little bit. So anyway, long story short, more kids, more competition, better program at the end. We've won championships as a team, won Coach of the Year, all that other stuff. We did really well. I found a role with that wrestling program. I worked with the inexperienced guys, and then I worked with the big guys. So I was coaching football then. I got into coaching football after wrestling, so I'm a football coach. We would get some of the bigger guys that played football to come out. They already knew me. They were somewhat comfortable with me, and I would work with the bigger guys. So I would get those bigger guys up to speed, and next thing you know, towards the end of the year, they're learning a few moves. They got really good at the moves that they did know because we just drilled it, and they were winning matches and placing in tournaments, and it was pretty cool, and it made me feel good because I didn't have a huge role. I just had my little niche, those small group of guys that I worked with, and we were able to develop them a little bit better. So overall, it was a great experience. So then at the same time, I got involved coaching middle school football. Did that for 2 years. Had some interesting experiences there. Decent teams were okay. Getting to the high school then after 2 years, I asked the head coach, basically, hey, long-term plan is I want to coach high school football. If you ever have any openings, maybe consider me. And a former coach told me to do that. He was like, hey, if you want to do it, you just have to ask them. You just have to tell them what you want to do, and maybe they'll consider you when an opening comes. So anyway, get up there in the high school ranks, and we were bad. I was not used to it. 3-7, 4-6, just some really bad, losing some terrible games. Like one year that we did go 4-7, I think we could have easily been 7-4. We fumbled the ball so many times on the 1 yard line. We lost in the last second. One team came back down by like 28 points. They stormed back in the second half and beat us. So the difference between 4-7 and 7-4 was it's minuscule. It's this much with the sport of football. So we had to take a look in the mirror after that season. I mean, it was a lot of bickering between the coaches. Some of this stuff even got physical, and it was to the point where I thought we were all just going to get fired because, 4-7 just doesn't get it done. I thought we were done for. I thought we were all going to get canned. But athletic director down there decided, let us stick around for a little bit longer, and we did. And eventually we started having some good teams and competed for district championships and ended up winning a district title during that period. So we were able to turn it around, which is nice. But the reason we were able to turn it around is because we had a good group of kids and good athletes, and they really helped us coaches. They kind of they were able to make up for some of our flaws as coaches, just because they were good athletes and good players. And a lot of those kids went on to play in college. So that's kind of the history there. During that time, too, I would say the last 5 years that I've worked with the high school team, I was a strength and conditioning coach there as well. So, strength and conditioning coach, spent a lot of time with the kids. Then I was coaching JV, junior varsity on Mondays, spent a lot of time with the younger guys. Then I was coaching varsity also Friday nights. So I got to know those older guys pretty well. And I was able to build those relationships in the weight room, build the relationships at the junior varsity level. And then, when these kids became older, they got a little bit of an attitude, but they seemed to always treat me well just because I was able to establish relationships with them when they were younger. So, they would still question me on some things. And, kids get to be 17, 16 years old, like juniors in high school. They start to get a little swagger. They start to get some muscle on them. They start to feel good about themselves. They start to get a little snappy sometimes and a little yappy. And they think because they've been lifting weights for 2 or 3 years, they know what they're doing. Luckily, we didn't have too much of that. The kids were good kids and just fortunate in that sense. So during that whole process, I stopped coaching for a year. That's actually the year that they did win a district title. I worked with the weight room all the way pretty much close to the season, and then I stopped. It got to a point in time where I was, I remember a quote saying, hey, it's better to stop a year too soon than a year too late. And I was approaching that year too late situation where I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. When I first got into coaching, I was watching 10, 12 games a year. I was watching clinics online. I was going to all these clinics. As I got a little bit older and started doing different things with my life, I realized it just wasn't that important to me anymore. Like, it was still a game to me. Before, it was kind of taking over my life, but then that shifted, and I'm like, you know what? It's a football game, guys. These are high school kids. It's like, I don't need to define, and my happiness and sadness is not going to be defined by a game played by 15-year-olds. So I stopped coaching for a year. Then there was a coaching change at the school, and a good friend of mine got the head coaching job. So I get back in there. They bring me in. I'm coaching the guys in the weight room. And then I was a quarterback coach, and they had a quarterback coach on staff. So I'm like, cool, I'll just do the weight room, no problem. Quarterback coach leaves at the last, kind of in the summertime, which in football, getting ready for the season, this is kind of a last second thing. So after a little arm twist, and I get asked 3-4 times, I say no, and then I was like, you know what, whatever, I'm back, let's do this thing. And when I decided to get back into coaching, I felt like that scene from The Godfather when Michael, I think it might be Godfather 3, he's trying to become legitimate and not live a life as a criminal anymore. And he has that quote that's like, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. And I always, every time I get sucked back into coaching or doing some things, that quote's always, it's one of my favorite trilogies of the movie. It's one of my favorite movies, basically. And I always think of that when I get convinced to do something that I know is probably not the best thing. So I get pulled back in there, and the same stuff happened. I mean, I coached a year and it was good. Then the next year comes around and it's fun. It is what you make of it. I enjoyed the weight room. I enjoyed the JV games, but my brain wasn't totally there. I started thinking about where else I could be. I could be at the gym training people. I could be at home with my girlfriend. I could be on our farm doing some farm work, but instead I was hanging out there on the football field, and I just wasn't totally committed. And, I talked about, too, my health. There was a year after my brother died that, I was coaching wrestling, coaching football, and I just started to think, my blood pressure went sky high, and it was super scary. I'd feel it in my heart. And luckily, I just had a physical, and the blood pressure's all good now. But there was just a period of time when it was super high. And, that is always in the back of my mind. And the lack of sleep, being out, we have a game Friday night, you're out to, who knows, 10:30 sometimes, maybe 11 by the time you finally get home. Then you need a good hour or two to kind of decompress and wind down after a game. So, the health was a concern also, and I'm like, this is not optimal for me. Not getting enough sleep, being stressed out, working, 30 hours with football and then another 30-plus hours at the gym here. I know that 60-plus hours is just not sustainable for long-term health. So I'm done. I packed it in. And my friend who was a coach, he understood. He kind of saw it in me too. He saw that I lost a little bit of interest and was just not as available as I was in the beginning. So, and also, I mean, I didn't like I said, like football didn't define who I was. And some of the guys, not only with football, but in other sports and other working with other teams, it's like that sport defines who they are. And, it's all they kind of talk about. And, they end up talking about some of these kids as if they're professional athletes, forgetting that they are 15 years old and that they might be a little dramatic and they might, milk an injury a little bit longer. It's like this is not their job. They're doing this to have fun and hang out with friends and to play a game. So to say a kid is, soft or he's weak-minded and all this other stuff, they might be, but I don't think that's the positive way to go about changing things around. So, if you want to find a change, if you want to make a change in that person, I don't think you do it by talking trash behind their back and then creating this narrative in your head, so that when you do interact with the kid the next time, you're like you got this in the back of your head that, hey, he faked this injury, he's not right for us. You might not play him 1 week because of it. And I don't know, things just got ugly, and I'm like, I guess at the end of the day, adults, whether it's parents, coaches, athletic trainers, who else is out there? Adults, they kind of ruin my love for the game. So part of the reason too with the adults and stuff is, you come across this Dunning-Kruger effect, which is, it's basically a cognitive bias where those with this is going to sound bad, but those with low level of competence perceive themselves to be vastly superior to others. So there's always a scale and there's always a range. So there's, say there's a parent that never played football, he's not going to know as much, or she's not going to know as much as a parent that played football. That parent that played football might not know as much as a middle school football coach. Football coach might not know as much about a high school coach and all that other stuff. Climbing up the ranks, a high school football coach, no matter how successful you are, you don't know much compared to a college coach compared to an NFL coach, night and day sometimes. All right, so to think that you have some sort of superiority over somebody is not the right way to do it, because there's always somebody out there better than you, smarter than you, and so on. So, in my opinion, ego is the enemy when you're coaching, and being stubborn is kind of playing a role in that too, in the sense that like you don't have an open mind. You think you got this thing figured out, but you really don't. And let's say you do have some mild success as a coach, with your current thing, not having the ability to kind of mold and adapt to each and every situation becomes a problem. So, or you might cling to the past in the sense of like, hey, we did this stuff for 10 years and it's worked for 10 years. Let's not change it. I don't care who our personnel is. I don't care who's our running back, who's our quarterback. We're going to run this offense and we're just going to kind of force a square into a round hole. That's not gonna get it done. So there's that whole thing. You work with some guys and they want to turn back the clock. There's got to be at least a dozen guys that were like, if I could just turn back the clock and suit up one more time and play with you guys, man. And it's like, you know what, guys? Come on now. We're 40, we're 50, some might be 60. You really want to turn back the clock and play another game of football? It's like, isn't there anything better since your playing days? Hasn't life been fulfilling enough that you want to kind of turn the clock back? So that's another also thing I struggled with. And, I think the list could go on here. Now, you're coaching with some guys here, and like I said, ego's the enemy. I coached wrestling with a guy. I may have been related to him. May have been my brother. And, he was upset the one year because he was an assistant coach and the head coach got the Coach of the Year job, or Coach of the Year award. And I'm like, dude, who cares? Like, you guys won this award. The team was awesome, whatever. But it bothered him because he thought he put in a lot of work and wanted some credit. All right, fine. Football coaches, same thing. Hey, my offense or my defense or my special teams, we're the reason we're winning games. But nobody cares to know that all the attention goes to the quarterback or to the head coach or to this other person. Ego, again, getting in the way of it. Coaching with other guys, and you think because you have this cognitive, you're thinking in your mind, hey, you perceive yourself to be better than somebody. You treat the assistant coaches or guys that are your assistant or lower level guys, you treat them like crap. When really it's like, if you want this whole organization, this whole team to be better, it starts from the bottom. starts from the ground and just work its way up. You want, leading from the front, okay, that's fine, but it's actually leading from the bottom, getting those inexperienced guys up to speed, getting everybody up to a certain level. That's what's going to make you successful in the long haul, not just focusing on the top end guys, but trying to bring everybody up to a higher level. What else we got here, man? Other coaches bullying kids. You're working with 12, 13, 14-year-olds, giving ridiculous nicknames, picking on kids. I don't know what it is, but it's out there, and I've seen it. I've seen it with guys I've worked with. I've seen it in other schools, other organizations, laughing, getting a good chuckle out of at the expense of a 12-year-old is never something I would I was cool with. So, when I see some stuff like this, when you're a new coach, you're like, man, is this really how it is? But eventually over time you realize that no, it doesn't have to be that way. You could do your own thing. And, at the end of the day, when I got out of coaching, I just realized that these guys or these women, they weren't my peers anymore. And I just wanted to, I was just ready to move on, a lot of people that you come across, they want to be somebody else. They kind of mimic another coach. They want to be Bear Bryant, Vince Lombardi, Dan Gable in wrestling, maybe Pat Summitt in basketball and girls hoops, or who's some other tough coaches out there, Bobby Knight on the men's side of things. And you know what? That coach, in my opinion, just doesn't work anymore. And not because things have changed time-wise, but I just think, everybody's just kind of brought up to a different level now in the sense of what they know. And, they still have respect for coaches, but not to the point where they could be berated by an individual and, still work hard and still be motivated to do things. So, to think you're going to be the next Vince Lombardi and you start acting like him, maybe you start mimicking some other coach's mannerisms. I've talked about this before. It's like you just become a parrot and you kind of say what that person has said as opposed to becoming authentic and being who you are. So you become a parrot, inauthentic, you start to mimic other people, and it's kind of a phony thing where, in the short term that might work. I remember Rex Ryan, for example, got in there with the Jets, and they were freaking winning those first 2 years. I think they were in the AFC title game, but eventually people got sick of his act. And, I think eventually, I don't want to say he was inauthentic because I think that's who he is as a person, but he was just a little bit too rough and tumble to the point where, these are professional athletes and they just got sick of listening to him. So, and he didn't change who he was. He is who he is. So we can't say he was inauthentic, but I think, him being I think him not being not being able to change his mindset a little bit, his stubbornness maybe caused him his job. So, if you're not willing to change your methodology, if things don't work, you're going to struggle. You're probably going to be out of work or your team's not going to be successful. So, that's kind of my history on the coaching stuff. And now I want to kind of get in this book a little bit, Brett Bartholomew's book, Conscious Coaching. And one of the big things right off the bat that I remember highlighting this, and it really stuck out, was in order to get them to move physically, we must get them to move psychologically and emotionally. So all these hardy, rough and tumble guys, if I told them, hey, we need to work on them psychologically and we need to work on their emotions, how they're feeling, they would probably tell me to shut up and laugh at me probably. I'd become the joke in the coach's room. So anyway, I've read that quote. It's from the book, and I was like, you know what, this applies. And I think it applies to my current job here, working with kids, adults, anybody. You need to get, if you want them to do what you want them to do, you got to kind of get to them. You got to build some rapport with them. You got to have small talk with them. You got to learn everybody's names. You got to crack jokes. You got to kind of be one of them, and you got to be there for them. And if they know, if you have these meaningful daily interactions with everybody, then they know that you got their back. And these things kind of compound over time, and they're vital to relationship building. Trying to be this tough guy, not learning people's names or whatever, it just doesn't get it done anymore. And like I said before too, being in the weight room, being a strength and conditioning coach with the school that I worked at, I kept things very loose in there, and I wanted these guys to work and get stronger and put in and just get some gains. But also, I wanted to get to know these guys, and I wanted them to have a good, positive, and safe environment. I wanted to keep people healthy, and I wanted kids coming back. So how do you do that? If you want them to come 4 days a week, which is quite the commitment for off-season high school football training, we had to give them a reason to come back, and I thought it was my job to do that. So I kept it light, and I got to know these guys the best I could, so that I can motivate them to do the things I wanted them to do. So anyway. Once these guys get to know that you got their back and that you care about them, they won't try to undermine you or they won't try to turn on you. Now, eventually you do have those kids that do that where you could see it stirring a little bit. Say we would front squat, and if you don't know what that is, we have a barbell going across here. The barbell is going to sit in this crease kind of here where there's an indentation by the collarbone, all right? So the bar's sitting in here and your hands are underneath the bar like this. So the bar's resting in here. Sometimes it would bother kids' forearms and wrists. Now, if there was terrible pain, we wouldn't do it. I would just have them do something else, but some kids just didn't feel like doing it because these muscles would get stretched in there. Or they say, oh, this would hurt. Could I do it a different way? I do it this way at another gym. And at the end of it, the front squat we were using to support, to help us get stronger in another lift, a clean. So I was like, you know what? We got to get comfortable in this front squat position if we expect to clean big weight. So I don't want to say I made everybody do it, but I kind of did. You know, it was a strong nudge in that direction. Like, guys, we got to get comfortable here. And these muscles, they'll stretch out, they'll get loose, and it won't hurt as much. It's going to take some repetition, but you got to work with me here, and we got to do it. Anyway, one kid still fought me on it because he worked out with another guy, and that's how they did it over there. So, you know what? You just kind of pick your battles, and when we're doing the clean exercise and that person who's bigger than a good majority of the kids on the team is lifting significantly less weight than the other guys, you know, you just kind of point out, like, dude, this is why I'm telling you, like, we got to get good here. And if we're not going to get good here, we're never going to be able to clean to our full potential. So that's that. You know, guys have a parent say that has a little bit of background in the weight room, or they thinks that they have a little bit of knowledge in the weight room. You know, they're going to be in their kid's ear and they're going to want their kid to do this. Why aren't they doing that? Why is it X, Y, and Z going on? Why aren't they doing, you know, why aren't they, running a mile? And it's like, you know what? Let's back down for a second here. I understand that is your parent and you got to listen to them. I don't want to make this me versus a parent situation, but you know what? If you're going to come in here and work with us, you gotta kind of do the program we're doing. So, you know, you're going to get that everywhere. Some kids are going to push back. They're going to test your limits, I think, but you know, holding firm. And, you know, you got to kind of, you know, like Jocko Willing says, you got to kind of flank people sometimes. Instead of coming straight at them, say you are dealing with a stubborn person, a stubborn kid, instead of coming straight at them and saying, hey, no, you have to do it this way, you come at them, you flank them, you come at them from a different direction. So that kid that didn't want a front squat here, fine, you want a front squat and hold it a different way, that's cool. But then the flanking technique would be you come at him then like, hey, man, why is everybody cleaning more than you? It's because you can't get the bar in the right position on the catch. And that's why these kids that are 40 pounds lighter than you are throwing around 20 pounds more. So anyway, you kind of come at them at a different angle instead of coming straight on. I think people respond to that a little bit better. That goes for all relationships, by the way. Nobody likes to get attacked straight on, you know. People go into defense mode and they get defensive. So you got to find a way to work with them. I'm not talking about manipulating people or anything like that, but I'm just saying you got to kind of find some ground there that will work for both of you. So anyway, my rant is over on that. But so, you know, some kids, they'll try to undermine you and whatever. It's all good. You just got to figure out a way to motivate. And if you can't get these kids on board, then it's your fault. Always take a look in the mirror. You know, the kids are an extension of you. Show them some respect. Show them you got their back. Show them you care about them getting better. And then they're just going to follow, you know, not blindly follow. They might ask some questions here and there, which is totally fine. But when they do ask questions, you don't say, because I told you to do it. You know, I saw that a lot with football coaching too, where it's like a football coach who might know a little bit about weightlifting, they would be in the weight room telling kids something, and when kids would ask like, well, what are we doing that for? They didn't have an answer for it. So it's like, it doesn't make sense to me. So, you know, if you're going to ask somebody to do something, you better have a reason why for it, because especially now kids want to know. Kids are smarter now. They're not dumb. They can look anything up online. So you can't BS your way around things. If you're telling them, hey, we're going to go run 8 hills, you know, you better have a reason for why, whether it's hey, we're trying to get your mind right. You know, we're trying to build up those legs. We're trying to condition you with short, quick sprints. You got to have an answer for them that makes sense. You can't just say, because I'm your coach and I said so. Because nobody responds to that crap. Yeah, nobody does. So, you know, and then at the end of it too, at the end of the day, man, like I was saying, the kids are an extension of you. It's your program. Whether or not you're the head coach, assistant coach, whatever, don't pass the buck off to somebody else if there's an issue in that. With anything, you know, just be responsible for what you're doing as a coach. You got to build these relationships. if you want them to move physically, you got to get to their minds and you got to get to their emotions and you got to let them know, hey, we're in this thing together. And if you're having a hard time with that, you might have to rethink your approach. Stop blaming the kids, saying kids these days stink. It's not the kids' fault, it's your fault, all right? You've got to be able to get them to do the things that you want them to do. Now, going back to the book now, there's going to be 4 key elements that, Brett Bartholomew talks about. First one is buy-in. The second one is relationships. The third one is social intelligence. The fourth one is time. Now, with buy-in, basically I just talked about building these relationships. But buy-in is all about maintaining those relationships over time. So you get them on board. You get them excited about what you're doing. And then what? Do you stop following through? Do you stop doing some of those things, or do you maintain it? That's going to be the difference between whether or not you're going to be successful long-term or short-term. I think I used Rex Ryan as an example before. He, on one end of the spectrum, he might have come in there, guns blazing, let's do this, that, and the other thing, and he got these guys fired up to do it. But after a few years there, and those guys heard the same message over and over, maybe they weren't as fired up and as motivated to succeed under that coach. Living in Bethlehem here in the Lehigh Valley, we had Eagles training camp literally 5 minutes down the road for like 12 years here. Andy Reid was the coach. He was there for every year that Eagles training camp was here. I believe it was Andy Reid. So he had a long tenure in Philly. And they had some great teams. But at the end of it here now, they had he's a great coach with Kansas City Chiefs too, by the way. He's still a great coach. So it's not like his level of ability dropped off at all. But he might have just needed a new environment, a new team, and the team might have needed a new coach. Somebody maybe a little bit different, to give them a different message, not the same guy over and over again saying the same stuff, doing the same plays, doing whatever. So, I think overtime is the key component here. When you get that buy-in up front, when you get those kids motivated to do what you want them to do, you got to maintain that level. And if you don't maintain that level, it might be time to look in the mirror and be like, hey, I might not be the right guy for the job anymore, instead of trying to hang on and make things happen. So that's one key element. Second key element, relationships. And in his book, he talked about one thing. How do humans get to the top of the food chain? By bonds. Survival equals bonds, creating these bonds. You look through history, there's some great books out there. Sapiens is one. Yuval Noah Harari. He talks about the evolution of man, and it was all through our ability to work together and to survive together. Hunter and gatherers, they work together and they survive together. Another book, Tribe, Sebastian Junger, guys. I would highly recommend those 2 books in terms of, adapting and surviving, and then building relationships and, being able to work together. So, and then also, so as a coach too, you need to care more. So when you build that relationship, the relationship is with the person and not the position. So it's like you need to care about that person as a person and not just because they're your quarterback. You don't want to overvalue the position as a quarterback, and then if that individual gets hurt, then you just move on to the next guy and start kind of kissing that kid's butt, when that other quarterback who might come back in 2 weeks might feel totally lost and dejected. So you need to care about everybody as a person, and you need to build relationships with everybody on the team. So like I said, guys, it starts at the bottom, works its way up. The more relationships you could build, the more relationships you can encourage your coaches or players to build with everybody on the team, I think the better off your team's going to be, because then they're going to know we all got each other's back, we all care about each other, and let's go win some games. That's relationships. Key number 2. Number 3, guys, social intelligence. This, I think some people have an innate skill with this. They're just able to pick up on things. They'll see some kid limping around, a small limp. They'll pick it up. Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing? You see that stuff. You got to be present in order to see this stuff. You can't be bullshitting with your coaches in the corner. All 3 guys over here having a powwow when the team's warming up. You got to use that time to see everybody. You got to use that time to ask how everybody's doing. Use that time to, build that rapport that we were talking about before. So you got to kind of pick this stuff up. Pay attention to the guys. Be flexible. If you're saying these kids are dragging, guys, time out. Let's finish off today with something fun. Let's cut this lift out. You guys are hurting, man. You guys worked hard. You had a tough scrimmage last night. We're coming in, we're hitting 3 lifts, and then we're out. That's it, guys. And you hit some stuff, you get them feeling a little bit good, get the blood pumping, and then they leave. Kids want to stick around and do some more, they could do some more. But at the end of it, it's about reading the room. It's about navigating, and it's about negotiating. Not negotiating in the sense of kids trying to get out of stuff, just negotiating with them and being smart about it. And it's not that square hole, square peg in a round hole situation again, like we talked about before. Social agility too is another thing where, you got to be able to deal with that kid that's that valedictorian. You got to be able to deal with that kid who's coming from a rough house. You got to deal with that kid that lives with a single mom and she works all the time and has a hard time getting him to practices on time. Like, you're gonna have to have some agility. You demand agility from your athletes. You got to have some agility with yourself socially and mentally, and you got to be able to navigate different relationships with everybody. You can't just be the same person for everybody. Some kid that has an awesome life at home, you might be able to give him a little bit more crap. That kid that has that tough life at home, you might have to give him more positive stuff, and it kind of levels itself out. So not to say that just because a kid has a good home situation gives you the opportunity to treat him like crap, but you got to understand that too. It's like, if this kid's getting dealt a tough hand at home or dealt a tough hand in all areas of life, maybe we don't need to give him another tough hand here at football or at wrestling or whatever sport you play. Maybe you got to, manage and maneuver that relationship a little bit different than you would for the kid that, just has a better situation for himself. So, you treat kids equally up to a certain point. You have blanket rules up to a certain point, but you got to leave a little bit of flexibility in there for just for those interpersonal dynamics that these kids have there, or what these people have too. This goes for adults too if you're working in a business. So social agility, that's another thing. And also with this social intelligence block here, this key is micromanaging is a bad idea. Nobody's ever going to enjoy that, because you start micromanaging and give your 2 cents all the time to everything, eventually they're going to push back and fight you on it. So definitely don't want to do that. And then, kids don't feel comfortable. You want them to have some freedom. You want freedom, man. Everybody wants freedom. And if they're being micromanaged, they feel like they don't have the freedom to make decisions on their own. And when you're playing in a chaotic environment like a game, you need to make decisions on your own. You're not always going to have somebody there to tell you what to do. And you can't have anything in the back of your head slowing you down like, oh, coach is not going to like this, that, or the other thing. So you don't want to micromanage, and you don't want to be a tyrant. Like I said before, because I said so is one of the worst answers that I've ever heard. I hate it. I think it's terrible for long-term anything. So, being a tyrant is kind of still a little bit micromanaging, telling people what to do all the time, not letting them explore things on their own. And then on the other side of it too is just like, ruling with an iron fist or whatever that saying is, and just my way or the highway situation. And nobody wants to work in that kind of environment. Might be okay for a year or two, but eventually just people get sick of it. Like I used, Rex Ryan, that type of personality, or some other tough personalities that, it just doesn't work anymore, I guess. That Vince Lombardi type, do it my way or take a walk. It just, nobody wants to work in that kind of environment. So for another key element here to being a successful coach is time. Like I said, show up on time. Be consistent and be present. Being present is probably one of the keys, and you need to be able to, when I said I stopped coaching, it's because I lost that ability to stay present. So I understood that, and I don't know if everybody always does understand that. They might start doing stuff for reasons other than the right reasons. So being present for the kids is the number one thing, and if you want to, be successful as an organization or a team, you got to be there for them. You can't be on your phone. You can't be, messing around talking to somebody else, an athletic trainer, another sport coach, whatever. A parent, you got to be in the game, man. Again, like showing up on time makes sense, right? You want the kids to show up on time, you got to do it. You got to be consistent with who you are. You can't one day demand one thing and then the next day be relaxed with it. You can't demand show up on time and then be like, it's okay if you're late, no big deal. And you got to have patience, If you want patience from your kids, with the whole training is going to revolve around being patient. So you got to have patience, and you can't give up on them ever, because you build those relationships with them, and then all of a sudden, if you just give up on them, it's going to be almost impossible. You're going to have to work twice as hard to get that kid's trust back on your side. So don't give up on anybody, and be there for them no matter how hard it is, or even if they don't even want to listen to you, which is highly likely. You still got to kind of be there and show them that you care, and that show them that you're at least going to try to. So with this time component, it was having your mind in the right spot. If your thoughts are elsewhere, like mine were, it's time to move on. It's time to go do something that that you're more interested in. Wherever your focus is, say, maybe you should go focus on that. So that is about so those were just 4 keys from the book too. Now, just a general sense of things about, training kids and developing kids to do the things you want to do. Definitely no expert, because there's a lot of people out there that know a lot more than I do. But one thing that he talked about in this book kind of really fit with what I like to do as a coach, and it's this slow roast mentality where, long-term development is the key, right? So if you're a 10-year-old, does it really matter if you're the best 10-year-old tennis player, if you're the 10th best tennis player when you're 18? I would say I'd rather want to be the best tennis player at 18 than the best tennis player at 10. So we got to think about the long term with this athletic development. So if you're playing a sport like tennis, maybe some cross training, maybe some sprint work, maybe some agility work, maybe some strength. And then how do you get faster and more agile? You do that. You could develop that in the weight room with your strength training. So having an open mind, trying to develop certain skills. So let's say you are a 10-year-old. We're talking relative strength, being able to move your body around. Different single leg squats, push-ups, chin-ups, climbing ropes, pushing sleds, things of that nature. That could potentially be pretty good for you, and you could get some long-term positive effects. Eventually, you could start doing focusing on absolute strength, where now you got your relative strength figured out. Now we could try to get as strong as possible in some lifts. We could start cranking the weights up in some of these squats and some of these, presses, or some of these chin-ups. You could add some weight to it now. And then eventually, once you develop some strength, you can develop some power and the ability to move. Power is just force over time. So, and then force is mass times acceleration. So moving your mass, your body fast, that's going to develop force. All right. So force over time, power, right? So you want to develop more power in your shot, you're going to have to be able to move your body faster in a shorter amount of time, if that makes sense. Pretty much the same thing. But anyway, so that's that. Slow roasted. Think about the long haul. Don't sacrifice long-term success for short-term success. We demand patience from our kids. Let's be patient with them. Let's be patient with the program. Let's be patient with the training. All right? Over time, it's going to be good for you. The purpose of everything we do is to enhance performance. Like I said, you have to have a reason for everything that you do. You can't say because I said so. That's not going to get it done. Got to be a reason for it. Every drill should have a purpose, and you should be able to explain that to somebody. Don't just do a drill for the sake of doing a drill. Don't do a drill because it looks cool. Don't do a drill because you saw it on Instagram or Facebook. Don't do a drill because you saw a college team doing it. Don't follow a program. Don't follow a program that you saw somebody else do, because you don't know what that person did in order to get to that program. So if you're a baseball player and you get your brother, we've talked about this. I'm going to hit it again, though. Let's say you're 5 years younger than your brother. Your brother played college baseball. He has his college program, right? So you're like, oh, I'm a freshman in high school. I'll just do my brother's college program. It's probably better. Wrong. Your brother put in 4 years of high school strength training before he started that college program. So he had the basic skills. I don't want to say master, but they were established already. He had it figured out. You don't have that because you're a freshman in high school. You didn't have that training. So you actually could potentially open yourself up to a harmful situation. And if you skip the groundwork, you got to lay the groundwork first, and then you could get into some of those more advanced programming. So you got to keep that in mind. And when you're developing these athletes, you got to plant the foundation. You don't want your 12-year-old doing stuff the 20-year-olds are doing if they haven't learned, the prior 5 steps. So what do? We slow down these drills. And the kids, and they look easy, right? Say we could do a high knee run. Kids are flying around. But then you tell them to do a high knee run and to stop and pause on one leg and have some balance. They struggle with that. So it's like, are we really able to, deliver force if we don't have a good, strong, stable leg? Probably not. So it's like we have to hit pause. We have to backtrack it. Granted, in the short term, these kids are going to think it's boring and stupid, but in the long term, it's going to help them develop, just faster leg turnover, more force development as they put force into the ground to move forward, things of that nature. So, you got to lay the groundwork first, and you got to slow it down a notch. And, eventually then going off of that, once the groundwork is laid, you could start doing some of these closed, these closed drills, we'll call them closed circuit drills, where you have 2 cones out there, right? So the athlete knows I'm going to work from cone A to cone B in this drill. Fine. There's no cones on a football field. Well, there's no cones telling you where to go on a football field. So you need to eventually then progress from having that closed circuit drill, cone to cone, into a more open environment where you're just going to fly and then boom, pause it, where you're doing a visual cue or a verbal cue to have these guys stop. Or they're going to react to another stimulus, which might be a person. So you're going to be set for the drill. Instead of going from cone A to cone B, you're just going to react and mirror what that person does. So you don't know. It becomes a little bit more chaotic, and you don't know the design of you have an idea what the drill is, but you don't know which way he's going. You don't know if he's going this way. You don't know if he's going to turn and run that way. You just have to react to whatever they're doing and do the drill. We got to make these things a little bit more chaotic. But first, everybody wants to skip the groundwork, though. So you got to remember, you got to teach the skill. Then you got to rep the drill slow. You got to rep the drill in a closed environment. Then lastly, once you develop perfection in those 2 areas, then we're going to try to make this stuff a little bit more chaotic. Because, nature, sports are unpredictable. You never know what the opposition is going to do. It's like playing chess. I can know every chess move on the planet, but I don't know what's going on in that person's mind. So I can't mind read. I don't know what they're doing. In football, if it's 3rd and 4, I could know that team might run the ball 80% of the time. And I'm going to say, we're going to prepare for the run and play, take our chances here because they run this play 80% of the time. But then they decide to pass. And then you're burned for a touchdown. All because you tried to think for that other person. So you can't do that. You got to be prepared, and you got to be set up for just about any situation you can. Obviously, there's weaknesses and there's holes and everything, but you can't try to mind read what that other person's doing. You have to focus on what you're doing. And if you do your job really well, then you should be able to have success. I think it was John Wooden. This was in the 70s, 60s, 50s, in the 50s to the 70s maybe is when he was coaching. And he didn't really care about what his opposition did. They weren't studying a lot of film or any film at all. He just wanted his team to run their plays to the best of their ability. And he was like, if I do that, if we do that, if we're going to be on and we're going to be our best we can be, we're going to win basketball games. And I think that could be applied to everything. If we do our job to the best of our ability, and if we work these drills, and if we, as coaches, if we set up drills that are going to set these kids up for success, we don't have to know what the other team's going to do because we've drilled it already. We've practiced against just about any situation imaginable. Every drill we did had a purpose, and we got good at them, and we made them chaotic, and we had some fun while doing it. So that's that. Now, just yesterday too, I wanted to add this in here, just with the drill part, or with the training for sports section of this podcast. Mike Boyle, who I talked about, he's out of the New England area. He's into hockey. He works with a lot of hockey teams, and he said, he looked at, say, I think it was the 2002 some sort of championship for hockey, and the 3 best players in a game, which I'm trying to think. I think they played 60 minutes. But anyway, whatever it is, they've only had the puck on their stick for about 90 seconds of that whole game. So if you're a parent and you have to decide, are we going to practice or just do more games, you have to remember that your child, say it's basketball, they might only have the ball in their hand for 3 minutes over the course of a 40-minute basketball game. So does it make more sense to go to more games where they're only going to have the ball for 3 minutes, or to have 33 minutes of them with the ball in their hand at practice, working all kinds of skills that they want to work on? So Mike Boyle just said it here. At practice, you could have as many balls as you want on the court, but in a game, you could only have 1. So if you want to develop skills, you have to do it in practice. And the practice ratio, the practice to game ratio needs to be up there. It needs to be 4 practices for every game, 5 practices for every game. Other countries do that when they're developing athletes. We in America seem to have it the opposite, where they're going to play 5 games on the weekend and maybe practice every Wednesday night, and that's that. And it's hard to develop skills that way. We get short-sighted with the training. We get those kids to be pretty good as 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds. But because of the lack of practice time at that age, when they become 14, 15, 16, they get behind, and they don't have that skill set, that large glass of ability. They're very short-sighted, very short, narrow glass. You can only put so much stuff in that glass, where if you could broaden their skills at a young age, you're going to be able to put more stuff in there down the end. So that's that, man. Value practice more. The drills, you need to have slow cook it, man. Slow cook their development. Even in the weight room, I do it. Kids can lift more weights pretty much every time kids come in, they have a little bit more in the tank when I'm working with them, and that's fine because I'm in this thing for the long haul. We don't want to max it out every day because eventually we're going to break it down. We're going to plateau. I'm going to see a slow, steady rise as opposed to the sharp incline and then a plateau, right? And drills need to mimic sport, and you need to have a reason for every drill. Slow cook it, have patience, and you're going to have success as a team. So, in conclusion here as a coach, creating your methodology is going to come down to a few questions that you need to ask yourself. Probably periodically need to ask yourself. You need to question who you are. You need to have some inspection. You need to examine it or inspect who you are. And then progression. You need to own who you are. If you don't own who you are, you're never going to make the progress that the full progress that you can make. So those three things. Always question what you're doing, all right? Examine your current practices. Maybe try to find a mentor to help you, create better approaches to things if you're struggling with something, and then try to make progress. And like I said earlier, adults, adults are for the good and then for the bad. Coaches, parents, whatever. We need to remember to manage your ego. All right, put your ego to the side. Be open-minded. We need to be a willing mentor. For all these kids, everybody, like I said, from the bottom to the top, try to be there for all of them. Some kids don't want a relationship with you. Fine. It doesn't mean you stop trying and you just start shunning that person. Talk to them still. Lastly, if you're in the line of work that I am, you need to be able to provide for your family, because all of this stuff is not going to be enjoyable if you're going to have the stress of not being able to provide for your family and to do things that you want to enjoy doing. So, you know what? That's pretty much this book, Conscious Coaching in a nutshell, or at least some of the key points that I took out of it. Now, if you're a new coach, if you're a young coach, I would pick this book up because the end of it has these interviews. It gives you like 40, 50, maybe even more case studies where each coach talks about an experience they've had with the athlete, the prima donna athlete, or the athlete that needs different motivational methods, or the quiet athlete that might be struggling with an eating disorder, or the athlete that, might be taking a supplement they shouldn't be taking. So all these coaches give their experiences with all these variety of kids. That kid that just keeps pushing back and keep testing you, pushing your buttons. You could read and you could gain some experience through reading their stories. So if you're a new coach, Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew, check it out. It's got a lot of good stuff in there. I've read it when I was done coaching for high school. So I'm like, man, this would have been great to read up front, because I was even familiar with some of the case studies just because of through experience. So if you don't have the experience and you want to try to get, you want to try to fast track your experience to the best ability that you can, check out the book. It's pretty good. Now, and then in conclusion too, I just want to make sure that I kind of reiterate this. Learn, like I was saying, to make progress, you need to own who you are. And I've got tons of flaws, and I wasn't as outspoken as I could have been as a coach. I let other coaches control certain things, but maybe if I would have spoke up, I could have had a bigger impact. Those are just personality flaws that I've had and still have to this day. I don't speak up enough. I internalize everything, and I keep things to myself. So those are the areas that I'm trying to work on personally. When I first started coaching, it was much worse than what it was now. Whatever my role is, I was like, I had the blinders on, and that's all I focused on. And I think that's okay in the beginning, and you need to have some people like that on your staff. But then over time, once that individual starts to develop his methodology and his own practices, things can get a little dicey, and you might realize, one, they might not be a good fit anymore. Two, they might start questioning your authority. And then three, too, like that person just might lose interest in your style. So, they might be telling kids one thing, whereas I might say, hey, I'm coaching you, I want you to do it this way. Whereas another coach now, he starts overstepping his boundaries and starts interjecting in areas that he shouldn't interject in. So that's another side of it too, that when let's say me personally, let's say I did start speaking up, I couldn't overshadow, or I couldn't put in confusing or conflicting opinions out there to kids, because then that just shows a little bit of a schism and a divide there. So got to be careful with that too. But then at the end of the day too, every coach has their flaws. I'm just sharing experiences that I've had, and I want to share some books with you. So, the reason I did this podcast and the reason that I started this account on Patreon is to just share some of these stories that I talk about here at the gym, or that I talk about with Frank in here. And then clients come in and they bring in all kinds of awesome, insight. They're giving me ideas on who I should interview, topics to talk about. And, we're just trying to give the people what they want. if you know what I'm saying, and talk about these meaningful things. And I wanted to do a podcast and open up an account on Patreon where I can open this up to a variety of people. And this podcast is available on YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher. So if you don't have an iPhone, you don't have Google Play, just go to Stitcher, Chris Fluck Podcast on Stitcher. You can listen to it on your phone, wherever, on your computer, or you can go to YouTube. We're on YouTube, Chris Fluck Podcast. This is episode 10. And like I said previously, my Patreon account, it's going to be going soon, guys. I'm just going to streamline all of the stuff that I do is just going to be streamlined right to Patreon, and it's going to be available to everybody. That being said, if you want to support the podcast and support what we're doing here, there's just some costs of certain things, just different equipment, getting some guests on, reserving the gym. Financially it could take a hit, and we're trying to do more of these things, and I'm trying to do more with the production team so I don't have to do all of this stuff on my own. But with that being said too, some people need to be compensated, if you catch my drift. So we're just trying to raise some money to support the podcast. So that's number one. You could always donate. It's on Patreon. Just search Chris Fluck. It'll be there. Second thing we're going to do on Patreon, we're going to get some Chris Fluck Podcast t-shirts made. So if you want to support the podcast, but you want to do it in a way where you feel that you get something in return, or you could support us out in the wild by wearing a t-shirt so other people could see it, you could go to patreon.com. Chris Fluck Podcast t-shirts will be available very soon. I'm thinking by the summer. Today's the first day of spring. I'm in talks right now with the company that's going to make them, so I'm hoping that, in the next month or two, definitely by the summer, they're going to be out there. So we're going to use that to kind of hopefully raise some money so we could do some more cool stuff. I want to do some more projects. I want to do some more videos that have, not only coaching methodology stuff, but also the way that we develop programs in the weight room, develop programs for speed and agility training, develop programs, say, for somebody that wants to lose some fat. These are all projects that are going to take time. They're going to take some energy. They're going to take some money. They're going to take some production. So that's what we're doing, guys. Not want to ask for money, but if you want to support what we're doing, go to patreon.com, find Chris Fluck. This is the Chris Fluck Podcast, episode 10. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope you have a wonderful day. Peace, everybody.